Hello everyone. If you like this audiobook and want to listen to more, please consider subscribing. And if you like this video, like it as well, enjoy.
USJ. Join my Patreon to get access to more chapters, and you'll help me make ends meet while doing so. Patreon.com, the synonym. USJ. After Aizawa announced today's class dynamic, everyone left the classroom and headed to the parking lot, where they waited for the bus to arrive. Since the USJ was located outside the school facilities, transport was necessary. Students naturally formed small groups as they waited, chatting idly to pass the time. Taka was no exception. Jiro, Kaminari, and Mina stood together, talking as usual, with Taka contributing his signature stoic silence. They talked about whatever came to mind. The training sessions and better strategies to beat Taka, everyone's favorite foods, everyone's favorite Rockinesis songs, something Taka smoothly ignored. Which teacher was their favorite, with Kaminari's choice being, of course, the modern hero history teacher. Among many other topics Taka just half-heartedly nodded to or answered curtly. His mind was simply not on their conversation. Noticing it, Kirishima turned toward him, raising an eyebrow as he came up with an idea of why that might be. "Don't you get hot in that, bro?" he asked, eyeing Taka's full hero suit as the aura farmer stood with his arms crossed. The others glanced over, curiosity sparked. After a faint snort, as if he had heard something funny, Taka shook his head calmly. "Temperature is meaningless to me." Kirishima laughed. "Man, you really are all-rounded, huh?" Taka nodded in agreement. Though, shit, I'm fucking dying in here. Inwardly, he was suffering. Who would have thought that his suit's greatest weakness would be a sunny day? Suit is gonna need some modifications after this, seriously. The moment summer hits, I'm gonna be soaked, and I'm pretty sure that's not very erratic, except for those who got some weird kink for it, I guess. Standing under the sun, in black clothing, with a bandana covering his mouth and nose, made the heat almost unbearable. The hat helped a little by shading his face, but it also absorbed warmth like a sponge. With it pressing down on his head and trapping the heat there, it wasn't doing him any favors. Such was the reality of hero suits, cool on the outside, absolute hell on the inside. I could fix this with that, he mused, but if I mess with that now, I'll lose possible aura gains later when I reveal it, and that's a no-no. Taka's eyes drifted toward Todoroki, who stood off to the side, waiting patiently and not speaking to anyone. A devious glint crossed Taka's gaze. Should I rage bait him into blasting me with some ice? He hummed inwardly, already imagining the conversation. "Oh, Todoroki, remember how I beat you last time? Bet I could do it again, and while at it, not get hit even once by your ice." Surely those words would make the emo teenager angry enough. Thankfully, for both Todoroki and Taka, before the aura farmer could try anything, the bus finally arrived, pulling around the corner before parking nearby. With the wait finally over, Yaoyorozu and Taka quickly took charge, organizing everyone into a line to avoid clustering. Soon enough, everyone boarded the bus, Aizawa included. Minutes later, the vehicle was already on its way to the USJ, with everyone joyfully eyeing the landscape and chatting with their seat neighbors. Taka, for his part, sat at the back of the bus, by the window, his edgy persona clearly not allowing him to coexist with the rest of the mortals, or engage in something as mundane as social interaction. In summary, he was being asocial. Still, even in solitude, one could find company. Albeit, a very quiet kind, one that matched him almost perfectly. Somehow, he had ended up sitting next to Tokoyami, their deep and thunderous conversation filling the entire bus for the duration of the ride. Truly, very serious matters were being discussed here. Eventually, though, someone had to break the silence, and Tokoyami was the one to do so, mostly because he'd noticed the rather heavy and huge weapon resting beside Taka's feet. "I see you brought the accursed blade along." Taka, who had been staring out the window with stoic intensity, shifted his gaze toward the bird-headed student without changing his relaxed posture. "Yes." "For what purpose, if I may inquire?" Tokoyami continued. "This is rescue training. A weapon does not seem especially useful in such a scenario." Taka exhaled slowly. as though the answer should have been obvious. But still, he took a few seconds to respond. Obviously not because he hadn't come up with an excuse yet. Of course not. After a few seconds, though, it seemed he was finally ready to reveal the answer. Evil lurks constantly, and peace is but a fragile illusion upheld for too long. To leave myself unarmed because of such a lie would be a fool's errand. Tokoyami blinked, then nodded solemnly. I see. Even under the brightest sun, darkness yet dwells unseen, and we remain ignorant of it. As you say, preparedness is the mark of the wise. I apologize. There's no need, Taka replied calmly. The illusion of peace is often the most dangerous trap. Indeed, Tokoyami agreed. As one who walks the path of darkness, I shall remain vigilant against the evil hiding in the shadows. This guy is way too into it. Taka's sweat dropped inwardly. Still, much to his annoyance, he was having a bit of fun. Not that he would ever admit it, though. If anyone ever asked, he was being edgy out of obligation to farm aura. Nothing more and nothing else. Unfortunately, their exchange was cut short when another conversation rose above the murmur of the bus, drawing everyone's attention. Your quirk is kind of like All Might's. From the front rows, where the seats faced each other, Tsuyu glanced at Midoriya as she spoke. The green-haired boy instantly panicked. HHUH, really think so? To be fair, he was already skittish by nature, so his reaction didn't raise too many alarms, even if slightly suspicious. Except for Taka, whose eyes narrowed at the greenhead's reaction. Man, this guy sucks at keeping secrets. If we even become friends, I'm never telling him shit. Though suspicious wasn't quite the right word. He already knew everything. Luckily for Midoriya, though, before he could continue screwing up, Kirishima jumped in. Hold on, too. All Might doesn't get hurt when he uses his quirk. They're just similar, that's all. Midoriya let out a quiet sigh of relief as Kirishima, unintentionally, saved his ass. Kirishima continued, scratching his head. Still, it's pretty cool to have a simple enhancement type quirk. You can do lots of flashy stuff, kind of like Taka over there. All eyes turned toward Taka, who blinked at the sudden attention. Yes, Tsuyu said thoughtfully, studying him. He is kind of flashy. Too flashy, Jiro added flatly from her spot. Sato scratched the back of his head. Is he? I didn't really notice. Kaminari shot him a look. Dude, you didn't see him fight Todoroki. If that wasn't flashy, I don't know what is. He put quite the spectacle back then. A faint frown appeared on Todoroki's face, but no one paid it much attention. Mina chimed in to defend him. Who knows? Maybe it was just unconscious showmanship. He knows how to dance after all. Maybe the instincts are still kicking. Dance? Tsuyu tilted her head. Mina threw a playful punch into the air. Oh yeah, he's got some crazy moves when he fights. They kind of look like breakdancing and martial arts had a baby. And they're super effective. We get our asses kicked every time we fight, and we can barely follow his movements when he pulls them out. Ida pushed up his glasses, looking intensely inquisitive. As far as I am aware, we have not held any combat exercises since Tuesday of last week. What exactly do you mean by kicking your asses? Kirishima answered this time, scratching the back of his head with a sheepish grin, before pointing at their group. Ah, that. Well, one thing led to another, and we ended up training together at the school gym after classes. I'd say it's more like Taka training us, though, Sato added dejectedly. Even after several sessions, we haven't landed a proper hit on him. You engaged in unauthorized quirk usage? Ida gasped. Not only that, but you fought amongst yourselves? Kaminari grinned and jerked a thumb toward Taka at the back of the bus. Relax. Class rep over there handled everything. He even got permission from the principal and all, and it's all hand-to-hand combat with no quirks involved. Eyes that... So? Ida froze, clearly caught off guard. It seemed nothing truly illegal was going down here. So you know how to dance? Tsuyu suddenly asked, turning toward Taka. apparently that being the most important detail she'd taken from the entire conversation. Taka stared at her for a moment, his silence heavy and ominous. "A bit," he finally said. "Snort?" A certain blonde snorted, a mocking smirk forming on his face. Almost immediately after, the bus jolted over a bump that the driver for some reason wasn't able to see in time, and somehow Bakugo slammed his head a bit too hard against the window. It ended with him clutching his head while everyone else promptly ignored him. "Didn't take you for someone who could dance, Taka," Tsuyu said, blunt as ever. Taka took a slow breath. Consequences always catching up to me. When will I be the one to catch up to them instead? Still, this wasn't an unsalvageable situation. "It gave me an edge in hand-to-hand combat when I needed it," he said with an enigmatic tone, only making everyone more curious. Even so, the way he worded it, and with him being vague about it, it felt too personal for anyone to pry. So they moved on. If only they knew it was to beat up a monkey. "So you guys are training together?" Ojiro, the incredibly memorable classmate, asked. "And why didn't you invite me?" Toru added from beside him, her sleeve waving furiously. "Well, we've only met up 3 times so far," Jiro replied, scratching her cheek. "And, to be honest, the only thing we do there is get beaten up while Takahashi dodges everything we throw at him. So yeah, you're not missing much." "We've become crazy strong though," Kirishima added, pumping a fist. "I'd say our coordination's practically pro-level now." "All right, let's not get that crazy." Kaminari cut in with a bead of sweat rolling down his forehead, trying to rein him in. From his seat, Iida slumped forward, his body trembling as his clenched fists rested on his knees. "I see. All of you engaging in additional training, on top of our already demanding hero basic training classes. How admirable." "See, chill, man. It's not that intense," Kaminari said quickly. "It's honestly kind of fun. Like karaoke, but more point-you-ish. And with way more punches and kicks." From the front of the bus, Aizawa observed the conversation quietly, a faint snort escaping his nose. "Still, I never took Taka for someone who'd agree to something like that," Toru said, earning several nods from nearby seats. "He's surprisingly friendly once you get to know him," Kirishima added. "So if any of you want to join us, feel free to ask. Honestly, we could use all the help we can get. He's just too strong." A few eager nods followed from those interested. "Why the hell are you nodding?" Taka deadpanned internally as he saw Tokoyami nodding as well from his peripheral vision. Eventually, he sighed, turning his gaze back toward the window, his poker face barely concealing his irritation. "It seems the unseen wounds from my poor aura farming are starting to show. At this rate, my aura might actually be in danger." If the class kept going down the path of realizing he wasn't as edgy as he appeared, there was a real risk that his future aura farming moments would get dismissed as meaningless boasting, which was just another way of saying aura loss. He was losing respect in exchange for friendship power. Unacceptable. Friendship power was for boring bums, like Midoriya. A true aura farmer relied solely on the power he cultivated himself. And the system, but that part didn't count. Either way, the problem was clear. He needed to regain the respect he'd lost. Something easier said than done. It was easier to lose than to gain respect. Yet, for the briefest moment, a faint smirk tugged at his lips. Fortunately, we're heading exactly where I need to be. After today, there would be no doubt left in this place that he was just naturally cool. Nothing artificial about it. Minutes later, after a while of incessant chatter, the bus finally came to a stop. The students disembarked, and their eyes were immediately drawn to the massive structure before them. A circular edification the size of a stadium, if not even bigger, and with a giant cupola working as a ceiling. USJ. And all of it was property of UA. Seriously, and I remember they had even more places like this in the show. Just how rich are these guys? Taka sweat dropped. This was a different kind of aura. The aura of pure, crushing economic power. Heh, not bad, rat. Snorting at the mental image of Nezu, surrounded by a swirling aura of floating bills, Taka walked alongside his classmates toward the entrance, Aizawa leading the group. As they drew closer, a figure was already waiting for them in front of the massive doors. Everyone, I've been expecting you. Instantly, recognition spread through the class. It's the Hero 13, the space hero who's rescued tons of people from disaster zones, Midoriya exclaimed, launching into one of his ever-convenient hero explanations because of course he did. Uraraka, beside him, looked just as thrilled, clearly a fan. Taka, however, was not. He remembered her quirk being impressive, at least on paper. But her role in the show had been minimal. Even Ojiro, the most influential and famous guy in 1A, had more screen time than her, and that's a lot. Achoo! Someone sneezed from within the group. Ignoring it, 13 turned toward the entrance and waved them forward. Come, let's head inside without delay. The class followed obediently, soon passing through the doors and marveling at the sight within. The place almost looked like a theme park, given the sheer variety and scale of the structures inside. Some students even pointed out its resemblance to a certain famous amusement park franchise. The difference, however, lay in what those structures were meant for. That being rescue work. A landslide zone. A shipwreck. A fire-ravaged cityscape. A violent windstorm area. Disasters of all kinds, recreated in massive detail. All of it designed for training. That was the unforeseen simulation joint. As the students nodded along to 13's explanation, Aizawa stepped closer, his eyes sweeping the area with visible displeasure. 13, where's All Might? He was supposed to meet us here. The astronaut-like hero shook her head. About that, it seems he did too much hero work on his way here and ran out of his daily time. He's resting in the lounge for now. He said he should be able to join us later, once he recovers a bit. Aizawa clicked his tongue. That man is the very peak of irrationality. From his spot, Taka narrowed his eyes. He didn't need to hear the conversation to know exactly what it was about. And because he knew what was coming next. Immediately, his gaze swept across the environment, sharp and alert. He wasn't afraid, but the idea of dozens of villains attacking at once was hardly calming. Aura flowed quietly toward his back, where the saw cleaver rested in its scabbard, secured to the belt Power Loader had given him, ready to be drawn the moment things went south. Aizawa had given him a weird look earlier when he tried to bring it along, saying it wouldn't be necessary given the nature of today's class. Taka had simply shrugged it off, stating it was his hero equipment, and that learning rescue work while carrying it should be a given. While not the best of arguments, fortunately, Aizawa's care for the matter wasn't big enough to bother trying to come up with a comeback, so he just let Taka go after that, thus allowing Taka to continue with his plans for his new weapon and bringing us back to the present. Patiently, he let the time pass as 13 explained the contents of the class and how the dynamic would be going. Which Taka, of course, didn't even bother to listen. Minutes passed, questions flew, and answers returned. And eventually, his heightened alertness began to itch. The timeline didn't get screwed up or something, right? He thought, sweat dropping internally at the very noticeable lack of villains. As more time passed, his vigilance wavered, replaced by mild bafflement. There was no way the USJ incident just wouldn't happen, right? Not to him. Not after all his preparations. Only a bum would miss something like that. Unfortunately for him, he had no way to know that the USJ incident would never happen. Zzz. Never mind, my bad. A portal suddenly tore open at the very center of the USJ. Taka's fading calm reignited instantly. Finally. A smirk spread beneath his mask. The first grand aura farming event had begun. USJ Incident 1. As the portal opened, Aizawa's until then bored expression snapped into sharp alertness. His head turned toward the center of the facility, where swirling purple mist churned violently, and where several threatening figures began stepping out of it. Without wasting a single second, he slipped on his goggles and prepared for action. There wasn't a shred of doubt in him about what was happening, nor was there hesitation. "Everyone, don't move from where you are," he barked. 13, protect the students. Both parties reacted instantly. 13 moved in front of the class, ushering the students behind her as she stared at the steadily growing crowd of villains in the distance. The students, meanwhile, froze in place, confusion rippling through the group. Who could even consider the possibility of villains attacking at the literal start of their second week of classes? Who could even imagine villains daring to raid UA, a school crawling with pro-heroes and with All Might himself on staff? At first, it was simply illogical. What's this? Kirishima tilted his head, squinting to get a better look at the figures emerging from the mist. Is it like the entrance exam, with robots or something? Midoriya and a few others instinctively stepped forward to see better. Do not move. However, Aizawa's sharp shout cut them and their carelessness off immediately. There was none of his usual laziness in it, no hint of casual detachment. That alone was enough to instill in them the realization that something wasn't right. And when he spoke again, that realization cemented even further. Those are real villains. The word hit like a physical blow. Bodies stiffened as dread finally seeped in, ignorance no longer shielding them. The people that most of them had always seen from afar, as something only heroes dealt with, were now here, in front of them. And realer than ever. Villains? What? There's no way they could get into the school. Where's All Might? Yao Yorozu, standing the closest to 13, reached for her. Sensei, what about the trespasser sensors? We have them, 13 muttered, her tone grim. But it appears they aren't working. If the sensors are down, then they must have someone with a quirk capable of blocking them, Todoroki said, eyes narrowed as he observed the enemy numbers. And for them to appear now, during class, in a facility isolated from the main campus. This was carefully planned and with a specific goal in mind. That realization sent a chill through the group. The idea that this wasn't a random attack, that these weren't brutish villains, that there was intent behind their appearance here, only worsened their dread. And when someone actually answered the remaining question, it only became worse. The villain's goal was, kill All Might, huh? Taka's voice cut cleanly through the group, making several students widen their eyes at the realization. Todoroki spared him a brief glance before nodding slowly. With numbers like those, no other objective made sense. They were here to bring an end to the symbol of peace. However, unconcerned with the villain's motives, Aizawa refocused on immediate priorities. 13. Begin the evacuation and try to contact the school. If the sensors are blocked, they likely have a radio wave interference quirk. His gaze flicked briefly to Kaminari, landing on the communication equipment built into his costume. You too, Kaminari, try reaching the school using your quirk. With that, Aizawa started walking forward. Scarf, his capture weapon, rose into the air as he prepared to engage. Midoriya, however, called out after him, panic slipping into his voice. You're going to fight alone, sensei? Eraserhead's fighting style relies on erasing quirks and capturing opponents. There's no way you can win a frontal battle against that many villains. Aizawa waved the concern off without stopping. Can't become a hero with just one trick, kid. And he glanced back at 13. I'm leaving them to you. And with that, he leapt, skipping the stairs entirely as he descended straight toward the approaching army of villains. Bam! Bam! Cracked as he landed before the approaching army. But despite the harsh descent, Aizawa stood back up, unbothered. Then, tightening his grip on his capture weapon, he began walking toward the ground of villains, before, soon, his walk turned into a full-on sprint. Something the villains reciprocated, dashing at him too. Sensei! The students watched with dread as Aizawa dove straight into the swarm, alone. But as the villains surged forward to meet him, the scene that unfolded was nothing like what they had imagined. Whack! Bam! Thud! The attackers were clearly inexperienced. Most relied entirely on the raw power of their quirks, with little to no actual combat training to back it up. Against the Aizawa, whose quirk was the literal antithesis of theirs, they were nothing more than reckless children waiting to be beaten up. Even when heteromorphic villains joined the fray, those whose quirks couldn't be erased, Aizawa proved himself far more dangerous than he had first appeared. He fought physically enhanced opponents with nothing but sheer skill, speed, and ruthless efficiency. His capture weapon moved like an extension of his body, snapping, coiling, and tightening as he swung villains around like rag dolls, using them as blunt instruments to smash into others mid-charge. No matter how many came, 1, 3, 5, Aizawa's eyes snapped from target to target with frightening precision. He erased quirks in perfect tandem with his movements, all while engaging 3 or 4 enemies at once. Villains were seized, kicked, punched, slammed, hurled, and discarded. Their own numbers turned against them. His control over the battlefield, its pacing, its numbers, and the constant prioritization of which quirk to erase first, was immaculate. Badass. Taka raised an eyebrow, quietly reassessing his earlier thoughts about All Might being the sole aura farmer at UA. Not bad, Aizawa-sensei. His observation was cut short when 13 ordered the students to retreat toward the entrance and begin evacuation. Taka didn't protest or comment. He simply followed along, calm and compliant. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. The entrance was only seconds away. When it happened, a thick, dark purple mist poured into existence directly in front of them, spilling from the air itself and blocking their escape. The group was forced to halt as the fog swirled violently. Then, the mist began to take shape. Nice to meet you, students. A towering body of black mist rose before them, 2 glowing yellow eyes forming within its mass. We are the League of Villains, the figure continued smoothly. It may be presumptuous of us, but we have invited ourselves into the home of heroes, UA High School, to make All Might, the symbol of peace, take his final breath. Its gaze swept over the students, sharp and assessing. Unfortunately, it seems he isn't here at the moment. Was there a change in schedule? Silence was the only thing that he received. Not that the students or 13 were going to answer him anyway. He snorted, "No matter, my role here is another." The misty body began to expand, tendrils of vapor creeping outward as if threatening to engulf them all. 13 tensed, clearly preparing to unleash her quirk, black hole, to absorb it all. But before she could act, 2 figures burst forward. Bakugo and Kirishima. One was eager to prove himself, and probably held a grudge against villains after what had happened a year ago. The other refused to remain frozen in fear, while a villain did as he pleased, as he had done months ago. They moved in a blur, fast enough to catch the villain off guard. Then they struck. Boom! A thunderous explosion erupted from one side, while from the other came a forward thrust, palms straightened and hardened into spear-like points. Against the villain's misty body, the explosion was clearly the more effective attack. Still, even the blunt, hardened strike forced the villain backward, colliding with something solid hidden within all that vapor. The blast kicked up a thick cloud of dust, giving the 2 students just enough time to pull back after their opening strike. "Didn't expect to get beaten by us first, did you?" Kirishima shouted, a nervous smirk stretching across his face. But as the dust thinned, restoring visibility, oh dear, that was dangerous. The villain's voice drifted through the settling haze, calm and almost amused. For a moment, I forgot that while you're students, you're still the golden eggs of this school. You must possess some talent to be here in the first place. The mist reformed seamlessly, as if nothing had happened. Two glowing eyes narrowed within the dark mass. But now, it's time for me to fulfill my role. The fog swelled violently. To separate and scatter you all, and send you to your deaths. Swoosh! Then, the mist exploded outward in every direction, a violent surge of black vapor that made everyone widen their eyes and cover themselves out of instinct. Amidst the students, 13's eyes widened as her suit's finger gloves shifted open, preparing to unleash her black hole to stop it. But that's when she noticed. Kirishima and Bakugo stood directly in front of her. There was no clear line of fire. You two, move awa. But by then, it was too late. In the blink of an eye, the wave of darkness swallowed them. First, Kirishima and Bakugo. Then 13, and those close to her. And then the rest of the class. One by one, they were consumed, pulled into a storm of dark mist that curved inward, forming a sealed dome that encased them all. A space meant to trap them, teleport them, and scatter them across the facility to face the villains that had already taken their positions, waiting for them. That was how it was supposed to go. It was a seamless plan, with none of the students' documented quirks in the villain's intel being something that should have been able to deter their plans. But then, a single ray of crimson light pierced the darkness from within. Thin, focused, like a laser cutting through the night. But against all that darkness, it didn't do much. Until the next seconds. Another followed. And another. Then many more. Crimson rays tore through the mist from every direction, carving glowing seams into its domain. Until, bam! The darkness was blown apart. Light burst outward like molten lava escaping a shattered shell, flooding the space and violently pushing the mist back. The cupule collapsed, torn open from the inside, and the mist receded to its origin. WWHAT is this? The villain staggered as he reformed, staring forward in disbelief. In another timeline, most of them would have been warped away, scattered across the facility and forced to fight for their lives against villains. But not in this timeline. Not with him here. This red light. This is? Whoa, what the hell? Ha ha ha. Should I say as expected? The class remained where they stood, frozen in disbelief, their bodies bathed in radiant crimson light. Some laughed wryly, others glanced down at themselves, examining the glow that surrounded them, protected them, still dumbfounded. Normally, such an ominous color inspired fear. It was the color of peerless power, of dominance, of inevitability. But now, wrapped in that light, shielded from the villain's mist, everyone shared the same realization. It was warm, like a thick mantle resting on their shoulders. As one, they turned toward its source. The villain did the same, following the crimson glow back to its origin. And there, at the center of it all, seems like you miscalculated, stood a single teenager. The red light condensed around him, bubbling into a dense, roiling aura. His normally black eyes now shone with an imposing crimson glow, gazing at the villain as though he were nothing more than a minor inconvenience, not a real threat. Then, the youth lifted an arm calmly, like a commander issuing an order. The light surrounding the students responded instantly, surging outward and shooting toward the villain. This time, not as a shield. The villain grunted, as invisible pressure crashed down on him, locking his movements in place, crushing in from every direction. But as a captor, Nauf. The youth rose a few centimeters off the ground, as though even walking was beneath him. In a blink, he stood directly before the villain, meeting his glowing eyes without a shred of fear. "How about we talk?" he said calmly. "About those plans of yours.